I'm Jeremy Till, and this is Amplify. Ryan Williams, guys, we are more than excited to have Ryan on. I had the pleasure of meeting Ryan back in 2008 at the CrossFit Games. His brand Forge was one of the first apparel companies in the space, and since that, he's been able to start multiple entrepreneurial runs with apparel, kettlebells, and since sold those and has a new company called Industry Threads. We're going to hear about where Ryan currently is and where he's going. He's got his hands on an opportunity with this company that I think he's going to see his best venture yet. So here's Ryan, guys. Welcome to the Amplified Podcast. We're here with Ryan Williams, about to get it on. We're going to first just dive into Ryan's bio and let him share a little bit about where he is in life and where he's come from. He's got a pretty interesting story. He served in the military. I'm interested in some of that information, and he's really transitioned his experience there into the free markets, the business industry. So I'm excited to learn because he's got great tales of starting businesses, selling them, and kind of where he is now with this new company, Industry Threads.
Industry Threadworks, yeah.
Industry Threadworks. Right on, Ryan. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, man. By the way, it's good to see you again. This place is, I think it's been at least like 3 or 4 years since I've seen you. Wow. Like, I should be interviewing you on this stuff. This stuff is amazing. So congrats on that. So from my past, I guess the nutshell version is I was in the military for 10 years, 9.5 of that as a Navy SEAL. I got out and I started a couple businesses. So 3 of those I sold, and now my main business is Industry Threadworks, where we're primarily a consulting company, but we kind of operate strangely. So I don't charge for consulting. I only charge for the apparel production. But the nice thing about that is that it allows me to leverage what I've learned by building my own brands and helping our clients to build their own brands and be successful. So this whole journey has been just amazing, man. Like, military is fun. I had a great time in it, but at the same time, it's like after a while, anything gets old. Like you could be a porn star for 10 years and get bored of it after a while. Sorry, I don't know how
That's one way to put it.
Here.
Yeah.
But eventually you can get tired of it. And one of the things I like about business is that, like, I went into the SEAL teams for a challenge. And one of the things I really like about business is that the challenges are always changing. There's never the same problem again over and over. And if you're having the same problem over and over again, you're being bad at business. So I like solving problems. And this new company allows me to reach out to a lot of other companies, help them solve their own problems, help them grow. And in return, I learn about a ton of other businesses with, every guy's operating at, 6% margins to, 1,000% margins. How do they operate in those spaces? What how that affects their volume, how that affects their marketing, their advertising spend, that kind of thing. So it's been amazing to me to learn so much. That's part of the reason I sold all the other companies, because they were very linear. They were very just product-based companies, and they were fun. I had a great time with them, and I learned a lot. But with this company, we're not really a brand. We're the company behind the brands. So I get to experience and talk with all the owners and learn from their stories of success, learn what they've failed on and how they overcame that. So for me, it's a great hub of information to build my own platform, my own base of knowledge. And that's part of the reason why I've been more open recently about, like, posting on, hey, here's some things about business. Because the more I learn, the more I realize it's not like this magic sauce thing. It's really just making common sense decisions consistently. If you can do that and just lose less than everybody else, you're going to eventually rise to the top through consistently performing even slightly above average over time will lead to success. So,
all right, guys, that's a wrap. Thanks for coming in for the podcast. That was awesome. That was good.
I love talking
about
this.
Just from what you said, there's so much meat and potatoes in there, and 9.5 years, 10 years of experience in the military, especially as a Navy SEAL. There's just so much to be learned there. But when we come back to the podcast and kind of what we're looking at with the people we're interviewing is really, and in my own philosophy, what I've experienced. This will be 11 years I've been operating my brick and mortars and my operation facilities. Is what I've learned, especially in the 21st century. And I think that the Navy SEALs, and you're an expert in this area since you served there, is that we're in, an Oldman mindset was really consistency was the norm. But now, inconsistency is the norm.
Unfortunately,
constant change.
Yeah.
And if you can adapt and overcome in today's market, in your business realm, especially as an entrepreneur, but even in the workspace, we've had people in the corporate world talking about constant change and adapting. So it's kind of like we move into a new mindset of ready for anything. And, as your experience in the SEALs, that's somewhat of what y'all are prepared for, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to be, because if you're not, like, if you think about the market as your enemy, right? I mean, it should be your friend, but let's be honest, the market is your foe, because it's constantly changing. It's constantly trying to eat you up. If you stay still, the enemy's going to know where you're at, and they're going to shoot you, because they're moving. They're always moving, and you have to track them, meaning you have to evaluate what they're doing, where they're moving to, and head them off, flank them. And business is the same way. Like, the market is constantly changing and evolving, and if you're not changing and evolving with it, like what you did last week may not hold a lot of relevancy. What you did 6 months ago probably doesn't. A year ago, definitely not relevant anymore. So for me, like, I try to follow and understand what's new and where the market's going. But the thing is, like, with all the business guys I talk to, every market is different, and they're all moving in such different ways. So it's really interesting to see, like almost like a battlefield commander, and I see all these guys who are fighting their own battles on their own little fronts, and how each enemy is like maneuvering, how these markets are moving and where they're going. I find it fascinating, man. I have such a great time with it.
Absolutely. Phil Knight with Nike, I'm just reading his memoir, and he talks about really the inception of Nike as Blue Ribbon and transitioning Nike as his whole mindset. Nike's built off of war, and that's kind of his mentality. And so I see that in our current day. There's this whole thought process of like that maybe you shouldn't think of it as war and all that stuff. But when you get down to the end of the day, I mean, you are out for your life each day and building what it is that you're doing and all that good stuff. So there's no question. It's a mental perspective, and I think there's a lot of different lenses that you can put on it. You being a military guy, I could imagine, war would make sense to you in the way you would operate. But
well, we all come at it from our own perspective, right? So that's just my perspective, because I spent most of my adult life growing up in the military. So that lens makes sense to me. But yeah, war, I mean, it's a negative word to a lot of people, but really when you break it down, it's you just want to win, right? You just want to win, and you want to do whatever that means to you. And this is kind of what I was touching on in my post the other day, is like, when you start a business, so many people start like with no real direction on where they want to go. They just like, I want to start a business and be an entrepreneur. Like, okay, well, that's great, but like, you can't just like, I want to go someplace cool and walk around the block with no direction and expect to get someplace cool. Right. You have to have, like any navigational plan, you have to have 2 points, right? You have to have an honest assessment of where you are, and you have to know exactly where you want to go. And once you have those 2 points, then you can start to make a plan. I mean, ideally, obviously, your plan will be straight to it. But in life and business, in actually walking around, it's rarely a straight path. Normally, you go one direction, you come in an obstacle. How am I going to get around this obstacle? And then you move and find a solution to that problem. So, if you can walk around the block and get to where you want to go, it's the same concept. Yeah. People try to like overcomplicate it, but I found like it's actually very simple. It's just look for solutions to problems and reevaluate and reattack.
Absolutely. So what I hear and what I've experienced too in business is your first 3 businesses were essentially like brands and product that you were in the market space. And what I hear there is that you were essentially competing with all the other brands that were in the space. Essentially like similar or not similar, but y'all were competing for, customers and things like that. And now it seems like what I would call that, it's more of an abundant or a collective like business model that you're currently running, because you're working with you're not necessarily competing with other brands, but you're helping other brands succeed. And it's kind of a different mountaintop than trying to have the best brand out of all the brands.
Yeah, exactly. Building a brand is the hardest part of any business, and I'm kind of relieved that I don't have that right now, because we're strictly B2B, like business to business, and I kind of think of us as like the business behind the brands. But at the same time, like you own Cross Central, and what you've built it to in the last decade is, dude, so impressive, And I kind of like miss having a brand, and like, because a brand is like your legacy. And right now I have a business that I enjoy and makes me money and I have a good time with, and I'm learning. But at the same time, I do miss having that sense of building a legacy, because right now I'm just having fun and building my bank account. But I think eventually
See,
we're
but
going to
if we really, and I would challenge what you're saying right there with your legacy, because Zig Ziglar talks about helping enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And really what you're doing in this egocentric realm of society as a whole, building a brand and all that stuff is definitely, you have yourself invested. It takes ego to run business, there's no question. So I'm not saying that ego's bad, but now you're essentially helping people win. Therefore, you're earning income and you're doing really well. And this third business, or your fourth business, is this your most successful of the four?
Yeah, by far. The growth that we've seen in the last year, like within the last year, we're up to, 7 figures. When each of my other businesses weren't that successful on that fast of a scale. And part of me is like, oh, this is really cool. I've done it in a year, but at the same time, I haven't done it a year. It's the same stuff I've been doing for 8 years.
Absolutely.
I just finally took a look at the model, and I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And once I turned my attention to it, it ramped it up. Now it's actually profitable, but I feel kind of dumb because it's been under my nose for 8 years and I just haven't done anything with it.
Yeah, but everything lines up and meets the timeline that it is. Exactly. I think everything happens for a reason and timing. Absolutely. For sure. But so it's kind of like from a timeline to get an understanding of the course. When did your new company start?
I think officially we started in late 2014 or. Early 2015, yeah.
Okay.
But when I first started Forge Clothing, like if you want to get shirts made, you don't really know where to go, so you can go to the corner store or Google, or you can go to your buddy who owns a clothing line. So that's how we ended up getting approached by a bunch of people who wanted shirts made. And we would do it as like, the bro price and the hookup and to help them out. So I've been doing it for 8 years, as well as being the designer and the production manager for my own apparel lines. But I never really looked at it like a business model until I sold the kettlebell company. And after that, I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? And at that point, I felt like I had earned the right to call myself an entrepreneur. And once I made that shift to like, okay, I do know what I'm talking about, and I can I can prove that and show that, then it's like, okay, now what does my trajectory look like from there? What do my options look like from this new platform that I've kind of found and built for myself? So I'm still learning my place in this, and also what you talked about with building a brand. I didn't realize until you just said that, but I think accidentally that's what I'm doing with myself, kind of like sitting on the podcast now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's why I would really challenge what it is that you're saying. I think that you're doing it in a way that might not be typical brand building in your own mindset, but what you're actually doing is going to build the longevity. So it's like, keep doing what you're doing and you're going to have the most success that you've ever had. And so I think you're on that track for sure.
That makes a lot of sense, man. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I didn't even realize that.
You're doing great. So you started Forge Clothing in what year?
2007 was we officially
2007 it started. And then you sold that in what year?
I sold my half of it in 2012 to one of our employees. So those two guys still run it to this day. Mm-hmm. Good dudes, but they're on their own path, and I've moved on my own path. So we catch up every now and again, but I don't really have anything to do with that.
So that was Forged, and then you started the Demon Bells.
Yeah, so I started the kettlebell company, and now there's several companies that have kettlebells with faces on them, which is cool. But that market didn't exist
Right.
when I first started.
Yeah.
And the only reason I started it is because I wanted one. I'm like, hey, I want a kettlebell with a skull on it, and nobody made one. So I'm like, well, I can't be the only one that wants these things. So
Yeah.
I started looking at how to do it. The manufacturing process is insanely way more difficult than I thought it was. A lot of lessons learned on that. But we ended up coming to market at the same time that a company called Iron Skull Fitness came to market. Same concept, but different products. And they also have very good products. And I've talked with those guys. They're awesome dudes. But then we kind of were the first. It's weird because it took like a year and a half to build these things,
Right.
but we came to market within like a week of each other.
Wow.
You know, it's like the same concept. But after we did that, all these other companies started saying, "Hey, that's a good idea," and doing their own stuff, which is totally cool. That's what the market is,
Right.
Like, what fun is CrossFit if you don't have anybody to compete with?
Right.
So, like, On It and their bells, really cool stuff, man. And what I appreciate about most of these guys too is they didn't like copy my stuff. I came up with on my own the design and the concept, and other people are creating their own version of it, which is the marketplace. That is what it is. And I appreciate they've always been doing their own stuff. In fact, Joe Rogan mentioned us on his podcast as like kind of the inspiration for their stuff, and we got a ton of hits off it. I was like, so thanks, Joe Rogan, appreciate it.
No doubt. And Aubrey and On It are local here in Austin, so they're a great partner
Cool.
of ours in some events and things that we do. So those guys are definitely innovating and creating and all their.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. They're doing better at it than I did, so that's good for them.
Yeah. So but think about it. You were the first one in the space to do that. It's that ingenuity and creativity, and I think that's something we had a previous conversation earlier about. Is there something that you have and its uniqueness in the sense of understanding? I want to say like the it factor, the cool factor, seeing that line. I don't know if it's because you're in San Diego and you got the sun in your eyes and all that good stuff. The good spot to be, but it's the good energy out there in California. But you can definitely tell, and that is a part of the essence of brands and things like that you carry and all that good stuff. So let's see. And then there was a third company that you sold.
Yeah, so I started Disciples of Iron clothing line, and that was an experimentation to me because each one of these things was a very niche market before. So Forge was we were one of the first military type clothing lines, right? And being associated with the SEAL teams too is the first one. Now there's every street corner, but at the time that was one of the first ones on the market. The kettlebells were the first thing on the market. So I took a step back and like, okay, I can produce apparel. I like designing. I like building these things. What are some brands or some markets that I can bring together? So my original intent was to bring together 3 large markets: was the military, faith, not so much like traditional religion, but faith, however that means to you as a person, and then strength, faith, freedom, the like kind of CrossFit community. Not so much CrossFit, but gym type community, because each one of those markets by themselves is a huge market. So I was like, well, that's awesome. I'm just gonna blend all 3 and it'll be great. Totally didn't work out that way at all. It was my mistake because I'd done very niche products before, and this is the first time I'd to like a shotgun thing. Like, I'm just gonna do the biggest market. If you blend those 3 things, there's probably like 3 people in America that don't fall into one of those 3 things, right? So the market was too broad. We didn't have enough of a narrow space to differentiate ourselves in. And I didn't have the time. I was still running Demon Bells at the time too, so I was spreading myself too thin. So I was looking for what to do with it next. And I was talking to my buddy Wes from Rogue American Apparel, and I mentioned I was looking to sell it, and he ended up buying it from me and has 10x'd it from where I had it. Because he is, I don't know if you've seen his stuff on Instagram here.
Oh, yeah.
He's like one of the big players in Austin. He is a powerhouse of just a marketing steamroller. It's amazing what this guy's built in the last like couple of years. So he bought that from me and totally revamped it. changed the market and the marketing, the branding slightly to kind of evaluated the market, saw what it was, saw the feedback, rechanneled it, and it's been a great success for him. So, and also a lesson learned for me is don't cast too broad of a net. And what I've learned is that niche is where it's at. I mean, unless you're like Nike or something, that I mean, you're
yeah,
just
but they
a
were
monster
niche
company.
out of the gates. They broadened as they grew.
Exactly.
So I mean, they were diehard runner joggers from the get go.
Well, yeah,
so.
like your business.
Yeah.
You know, look at all the things you're expanding into now. It
Yeah.
started off like the core thing that you had was we're going to be the best CrossFit facility in Austin, and then Texas, and then we're going to start building stuff out. It's the same thing. I just made the mistake of, you know.
Well, so say that, like, just to dive in specific about niches, right? So I mean, when you look across, you know, the platforms that you're building and building a niche, like, you think that's a vital part of growing a brand?
I think it's much easier. I think it's much easier to do.
Well, easier, that could be a good thing, right?
Yeah, easier. At this stage of my life, man, it's like I've done the hard things. Like, I want to do the easiest path to be. You know what I mean? Like, I've learned a lot of lessons. I'm not trying to go over here and learn that it sucks to get kicked in the shins. I know it sucks to get kicked in the shins. I don't need that lesson anymore.
Right.
So I'm trying to avoid the lessons that I've already learned and find things. And on that too, a lot of people, everybody has an idea, right? I have this great idea. I want to do this. And a lot of them are great ideas, but there's a difference between a great idea and a profitable idea. So there's so much we could talk about, like Twitter, for instance. Great idea. They're losing billions of dollars a year, and somehow they're still valued at $2 billion. If I tell you, hey, that's going to lose you $2, why would you buy it for $4? I don't get it. So there's a lot of things at the higher level of business.
Yeah,
I
that's
just don't
a whole.
understand.
I've definitely looked at that space and just looked at that larger, you know, venture capital arena. It's just what you're talking about. What I do is just a totally different beast in a sense of. I think it's Grant Cardone. I don't know if you're familiar with Grant. He's got the 10x rule. And,
Oh, yeah.
He does. He's a sales guy, and he just talks. He says, "Hey, I know my space, and I'm a sales guy, and that's what I do, and that's what I speak." And so it's like if you're talking about, you know, these other types of companies that are big, like that. I mean, it's just totally different space, and it just baffles me. But I get it. You know, people literally get investors to put in millions of dollars, and they burn and live off of those funds, and make no dollars, but they continue to get funded. So that's
amazing to me. It's amazing that people dump money into that. I don't know. Maybe this is the thing. Maybe I'm really dumb, or maybe I'm really smart. I haven't figured out which yet. But I guess the market will tell at the end of the day.
Right on. So with your business now, I got to touch on your Lambo. So what's the story behind that? I mean, you got it, and then you wrapped it with the snakeskin, and it's just it's
dude,
gorgeous.
It's so much fun. So a couple things on that. Number one, I've always I've wanted one of those things since I was like 7 years old. I used to pedal my bike to the grocery store like 3 miles down the road, and I would literally read every single magazine and then figure out which one I could buy for like $2.95.
Yeah.
And like I'd take it up to the counter and like pedal my bike back, and I'd literally read every word in the ads included, everything. So for me to finally find myself in a position where I could legitimately get one was an amazing milestone for me. So a couple of things happened when I got that. It was kind of reaffirming to myself that I do know what I'm talking about. Here's like the tangible results and like the trophy, you know, to myself for my efforts. But I didn't want to just, I'm a numbers guy, so I didn't want to just throw money at him like, oh, I'm going to waste, you know, $300,000. Like, I'm never going to do that. As much as I like the car, I'm not going to burn $300,000. So I looked at it. How can I make this car make me money? Which you wouldn't think a Lamborghini would make you money, right? But it does. And here's how I did it.
Absolutely.
So a couple things. Number one, I put in, I don't know how into specs of how I actually bought this thing you want to do, but I put 80 grand down on it. 30 was a check. 50 of it was on a credit card. So I wanted to get my points up on a credit card, so I put $50,000 on a credit card, immediately paid it off, but that also earned me 1% back. So I actually made $500 by doing that. put 80 grand down, $280,000 out the door. And so I financed $200,000, which is roughly just over $3,000 a month. The reason I bought a new one and not a used one was because the depreciation curve, they didn't go down far enough. If I was smart about it, really smart, I would have waited until about now or 6 months from now to buy one, where the depreciation curve is dropped, so you don't take that initial hit. But the percentage point I could get for a new car was like 1.9, and a percentage point I could get for a used car was above that. So the difference in depreciation was less than the end state I would be paying for the higher percentage rate. So it's actually cheaper for me to buy a new car. But that's the mechanics of it. But the theory behind it was my main problem as a business consultant, which is pretty much what I do, is convincing people that I know what I'm talking about. So when I'm driving around a Ford Focus, I have to spend a lot of time doing my background. Hey, here's what I've done, here's what I've built, this and that. And it takes me like 20 minutes where somebody's like, okay, you know what you're talking about, I'll listen to you. If I roll up in a Lamborghini, they're instantly like, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? Like, what do you have to say? And it saves me so much time, right? And also on that, my intent when I originally got it was to do these kind of things that I've been doing on Facebook with like, just we're driving around today or yesterday and we're just like, hey, I got a question about, this. And we talk about it and explain it and then post the video. And that kind of feeds into, generating some talk about it. And the car is wrapped. So the wrap cost $7,000. Excuse me. But because I put my logo on it, it's a tax write-off. And if I didn't wrap it, the depreciation for not having a wrap on the paint would be about the same. So it's actually free to wrap it, and I save money on it because it's a tax write-off. But here's where it actually makes me money. Mm-hmm. This is where I was saving money. Where it actually makes me money is my cost on that is $3,000 a month. The interest that generates and the attention it gets on social media platforms, going to events, the people that I'm able to contact now and meet with is a much higher level than it was before. My revenue has increased $6,000 a month. So because of that car, it pays for itself and once again. So it was all theory, like I think this is the way it works. And once I got it and started executing it, it works exactly like I thought.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah. How fast does it go?
Probably faster than I can say illegally.
Yeah.
No, it goes supposedly 202, but I don't think I'll be taking it 202.
Yeah, no, I hear that. So it's an interesting reason why I ask you that. And there's this, it's my own theory in the sense of speed, and there's this attraction, to speed. And these cars and the mechanics and the details of it and everything you just described is a mindset. And it all flows into this car, into this attention and this idea, which is generate speed. And the speed generates business, that generates attention, that generates, likes, that generates
synergy. Absolutely.
So much that's there. And I would honestly have to say, I would have to lie to you to say that you're not on the podcast because of that car.
See, there we go.
So and not saying that I'm materialistic in that sense, but you were brought up on my social media feed, and I follow you on Instagram and Facebook just because we go decade back. But it definitely had me. Ryan's doing something. And then you started to post comments about entrepreneurship and then that you were in my mind. In my space, and
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
I was thinking about you too.
Right. So I know that you come out to Austin and whatnot. So that's the uniqueness of the podcast. You just literally came into my mind and said, "Hey, when are you going to be back in Austin?" Because I think you'd be a great guest on the podcast.
Which is weird because we had literally just made tickets like 2 days prior.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about like things happen for the right reason. I fully believe things happen for the right reason. That's part of, not to get too philosophical, but that's part of the reason that made me believe in God. Maybe not in the traditional sense that like most people who go to church believe in God, but that's part of what made me realize from a mathematical perspective, there's so many of these little random coincidences that happen. They happen so consistently that the mathematical possibility of it being just random happenstance it's mathematically impossible. Mm-hmm. So that tells me there has to be something going on. Whatever you call it is irrelevant. So for me, God exists, whether you call it whatever you want. It's like gravity. Gravity exists whether you believe in it or not. It is acting on you. Whether if you say gravity doesn't exist, I'm not going to fly up to the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you can say God doesn't exist or whatever you want to call it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it's not acting on you. So for me to have like these interactions and these random connection points, it's just confirmation that I'm on the right path and that all these connection points that are being put in my way and my path are vectors that I should paths that I should follow.
Yeah.
You know, it's just being aware of it, though.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting, you know, in the sense of God and your perspective there, because I hear you, you know, a couple times you've referenced towards limitation of religion, and I think that's what you're trying to describe, as I hear you, is that God transcends space, time, continuum. It's limitless. It's, you know, abundant beyond measure. There's so much vastness to it. To frame it into a religion kind of puts things in a box.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to understand is you're trying to take it out of the box by maybe
Exactly.
not negating this or negating that, but saying the abundance of what God is and the
Exactly.
interconnection. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to describe maybe what you were saying.
No, that's a better description. That as soon as you said that, I realized, like, yes, God exists, but what we call it within religion is our like small understanding of the small box that is our limits of understanding. But what
Yeah.
God is,
Yeah.
we don't know. It's
Yeah.
these connections. It's these random things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the transformation even in my own spirit, my own, you know, body temple that I'm going through now is the radical mindset of this God that is supernaturally powerful and transcends all time space continuum. And so when we start to dive into that real introspective possibility, and when you're really tapping into that source, the possibilities are limitless.
Oh, it's fascinating.
And so
Yeah.
it just really drives me, and that's why I'm, you know, my overall seeking of faith and understanding has just been outpouring. And I don't think, like, as I started this Amplified podcast, and I've been seeking faith and these types of, like, mindsets, that's why I think, like, people like you, it's similarity, like-minded people that are really looking for the possibility of life and what's, you know, possible. But anyways, bringing us back on the track, which that was great. That's what this podcast is all about. But bring us back on track. You know, we're going to start to move to wrapping up. But, you know, I know that you had recently put something on Facebook about, you know, what it takes to be an entrepreneur and to be successful, and kind of like your, I don't want to say guiding principles, but like, what do you have, like 5 steps or like certain steps to take to be successful?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of traction on Facebook, like you said, because of the car and because of just being vocal about putting things out. So I get a lot of questions, and the questions help me kind of formulate these random thoughts or things in my head, and it forces me to funnel them down into, you know, bite-sized things, like how can I communicate this the most effectively? And lists, I think, are very effective. So I just, in like 2 minutes, wrote up a response to a question, posted it, and I think, sorry, excuse me, coffee's getting me. I think I put 5 steps in there, but really it's only a couple main things. Number one, you have to launch whatever it is. You have to take the first step. Hopefully that's with a plan. You should have a plan, but you have to start moving on it. You can't plan, you know, forever and then never go anywhere. So launch with the direction. Evaluate what happens. Evaluate your market. Evaluate where you're going with it. Take the feedback. The positive is great, but that means you're doing something right, and that means you don't have to adjust anything. So the negative feedback is the most informative, because those are the things that you need to change. So take the feedback, change what you need to change, relaunch, and just keep doing that. So launch, evaluate market feedback, adjust, relaunch, and just continue that. And that's what it is. You have to have an end state to that, you know what I mean? Because nobody wants to be grinding 18 hours a day for, you know, years. But that's another conversation, is what is happiness to you? How do you define happiness? For me, that's a car, not because of the car, but because of the experiences, like going fast. It's an exhilarating experience to go fast, and I enjoy that. I enjoy traveling. I enjoy going these things. So for me, money is a way for me to experience these things. So money by itself is useless, but the experience and the freedom to experience life is what that's my end state. That's what I want to get to. So for me, money is the key to that. For other people, it's, family time. It's, security. It's, any number of things. But the key is you have to start, but you have to know where you want to end up. The in-between pieces, it's just make corrections. That's really it. And be consistent with it, though, because you're going to have problems. And, you know how it is owning a business. Like, every time you wake up, somebody's like, oh, hey, by the way, your gym exploded or something.
Yeah.
Like, there's always something going on. But be consistent and just keep grinding. I wish there was a magic thing, but that's it.
That's perfect. We can pretty much end on that. So we appreciate your time, brother.
Dude.
So grateful for you coming in today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's really good to see you. Super impressed with all this stuff, man. It's really cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Please hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Conversate with us. Let us know what it is that you want to hear, see, or do on the podcast, guys. This is all about value for you, and we want to make it the best possible. So thank y'all so much for listening, and we will see you soon.